welcome to the second and final part of the President series, where I will be talking about my favorite and least favorite presidents. I just did my least favorite president. The video will be linked in the description and at the end of the video. Anyway, let's get into my favorite president, Theodore Roosevelt. Now, some might think of Teddy as an imperialist, while others see him as the guy who got shot and then continued to make an almost 90-minute speech. And while both are true, I will try to get you to see eye to eye with me, as he is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, president of the United States. Teddy Roosevelt was the first progressive president, but that title is thrown around quite loosely with early 19th century or early 20th century U.S. presidents, Woodrow Wilson. But there are many other reasons as to why Teddy is great other than his progressivism. Number 1. He received the Nobel Peace Prize. In 1906, Theodore Roosevelt was given the Nobel Peace Prize for his work to get the Japanese and Russians to talk about peace at the end of the Russo-Japanese War, and he succeeded. He also negotiated a dispute with Mexico. A lot of people thought that Roosevelt was deserving of this award, while others not so much. Some saw him as an imperialist and therefore disagreed with him receiving the prize, and some even thought that it was more of a political move than one of honor. Although he was an imperialist, his other major accomplishments did shine above all of that. Number 2, the Inspection Act and Pure Food and Drug Act. The Jungle by Upton Sinclair had exposed what was going on behind closed doors in the meatpacking industry and the harsh conditions that many workers faced. After the publication of the book, Teddy passed the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act, which had inspections on meat and other foods and drugs to make sure that they were destroying contaminated food and getting rid of diseased animals. The PDFA also put more restrictions on the sale of drugs. Number 3, national parks. Teddy was big on national parks and conservation. Teddy established 5 national parks, created over 50 sanctuaries for birds, and dedicated over 100 million acres of to national forests, as well as many other ways. The teddy bear was even named after Theodore Roosevelt because when he was hunting for bears and not finding any, his hunting mates tracked one down, tied it up for a tree for him to shoot. Teddy did not shoot the bear because he felt it was unsportsmanlike, but he did have someone else shoot it just so it could be put out of its misery. An owner of a candy shop put some stuffed bears in the window of the shop and received permission to call them teddy bears in honor of Roosevelt. The Square Deal. The Square Deal could be added to my part about conservation of nature, but it did a lot more good than that. The Square Deal's end goal was to help the middle class, but still allowing businesses to be free from outrageous demands. The Square Deal did protect consumers, controlled big corporations, and conserved natural resources. Roosevelt believed in government intervention of the economy to protect the consumer from big corporations that only tried to gain wealth. The demands of the Square Deal were often referred to as the 3 C's, meaning control of corporations, conservation of natural resources, and consumer protection. Number 5, the Elkins and Hepburn Act. The Elkins Act, passed in 1906, stopped the practice of railroads giving rebates to companies they liked. This was because smaller farmers were put into a situation where they didn't have equal access to railroads when they needed it. The Hepburn Act was another railroad act that was also created in 1906 that stopped the ICC and strengthened regulations on the railroad industry. Number 6, Theodore's low inflation rate. Roosevelt served 2 terms, and during those terms he was able to keep inflation relatively low, increasing about 5% per term. The low inflation is associated with good economic growth. During his time as president, inflation was only around 1% per year from 1902 to 1908. Inflation was anywhere from only 5% to negative 2%. Number 7, the Newlands Reclamation Act. Teddy helped pass the Newlands Reclamation Act, which provided funding towards irrigation. The act initially only had the first 13 states, but more states were added later on. The money came from the sale of somewhat arid lands that were owned by the government. Later on, the act stimulated agriculture and created good working land from land that was once worthless. Some states that benefited from this were South Dakota, Arizona, New Mexico, and Oregon. Number 8, the first workers' compensation laws. In the textile and railroad industry, injury was very, very common, especially when textile and railroads expanded. Before the Federal Employers' Liability Act, workers would have to sue in order to even have a chance at getting compensation, and these are relatively large industries, so it probably wasn't very likely. Teddy Roosevelt supported laws that would make it easier to be compensated if the company was proven to be at fault of the injury. Number 9. The 1902 coal strike. In 1902, the United Mine Workers of America went on strike. This strike threatened heating supplies in millions of American homes. After getting involved, Roosevelt set up a fact-finding commission. After the strike ended, miners received a 10% wage increase and a decrease in hours from 10 to 9, which doesn't seem like much, but I'm sure it meant a lot to them. This act averted a huge national crisis. And finally, number 10, he strengthened the Navy. Before Teddy was even president, he felt very strongly about the United States Navy. From his time as Assistant Secretary to his time as president, Teddy increased the size and power of the United States Navy, and to show off this new size and power of the Navy, Roosevelt sent the Great White Fleet around the world for over a year. The Navy started out with just 90 ships and grew into a modern Navy, all due to Teddy. This has been the Interrupt Story, and goodbye.